Please proceed with the security scan, ma'am. Very well.
It started like any ordinary day at Heathrow. Private jets landing, royals passing quietly through secured gates. But that morning, a sharp-eyed royal guard noticed something unusual in Queen Camilla's travel bag. At first, it seemed like a routine check. Yet within moments, whispers spread, radios crackled, and the air grew heavy with tension. What could possibly make a royal guard hesitate before the queen consort? What they found, hidden in plain sight, would leave not only the guards speechless, but the entire royal family shaken. Before we uncover what really happened that day, don't forget to hit subscribe, so you never miss the untold stories behind the palace walls. If you enjoy stories that blend emotion, mystery, and royal drama, give this video a like and share it with someone who loves the royal family as much as you do. Now, let's step behind the velvet ropes and into the moment that changed everything. The morning sky over Heathrow was a soft gray, brushed with streaks of gold as the sun broke through thin clouds. A faint drizzle hung in the air, typical of a London dawn. But inside the royal terminal, the private section of the airport reserved only for the highest dignitaries, everything gleamed with precision. Guards stood in formation, silent yet alert, every button on their uniforms polished, every movement rehearsed 100 times before. Among them stood Sergeant Daniel Wright, a seasoned royal guard with 12 years of service. He was known for two things: unshakable discipline and a sense for when something just didn't feel right. Today, as Queen Camilla's private jet prepared to land, that instinct stirred quietly in his gut. The radio crackled. "Her Majesty, Queen Camilla, is on approach. ETA 5 minutes, came the voice of the tower officer. Daniel adjusted his gloves and gave a subtle nod to his team. Positions, everyone. Remember? Professional, precise, and polite. For most, this was routine. Royal arrivals were handled with flawless grace, away from the public eye. But as the convoy rolled up to the terminal, Daniel noticed something. Something small, almost trivial. The Queen's security detail looked unusually tense. They exchanged short, coded glances as they unloaded luggage from the aircraft. One of the younger guards whispered something, his face pale.
Daniel's eyes narrowed. That's odd, he thought. Royal bags are always scanned and pre-cleared before they even leave Windsor. Still, procedure demanded that every item pass through inspection, no matter whose name was on the tag. When Queen Camilla entered the hall, she offered her usual warm smile. "Good morning, gentlemen," she greeted, her tone elegant but tired. She had been traveling for charity events across Europe, representing the crown with quiet dignity. But even from afar, Daniel could sense something was off. Her expression carried the kind of weariness that went beyond exhaustion. It was emotional, almost mournful. As her assistants began lining up the luggage for screening, Daniel stepped closer to the scanner display. One by one, the royal bags rolled through, handcrafted cases, official briefcases, and the Queen's personal handbag, embroidered with her royal monogram. Then the screen flickered. The image that appeared was odd. Inside one of the smaller bags, there was something wrapped tightly in cloth, tucked deep within the lining. Not metal, not liquid, not anything easily identified. The outline was irregular, shaped almost like a small box, with what looked like. Was that a locket? The machine beeped softly. "Officer, what's that?" one of the younger guards asked, leaning closer. Daniel frowned. "Hold that bag," he said firmly. "Secondary check." The atmosphere shifted instantly. You could almost feel the air tense as the Queen's private secretary turned sharply. "Sergeant, that bag is part of Her Majesty's personal items. It's not to be disturbed." Daniel's tone remained respectful. "Understood, sir. But the scanner flagged an anomaly. Protocol requires a manual inspection." A pause. The secretary hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Proceed carefully." As Daniel unzipped the side pocket, he noticed how delicately it was packed. Lined with silk, the faint scent of lavender rising from it. Beneath a few folded scarves was the item, a small antique wooden box. It looked handmade, its edges worn from years of handling. A brass clasp held it shut. He gently lifted it out. "What's inside?" asked one of the guards. Daniel turned it over in his hands. Doesn't look dangerous, but it's definitely not on any declared list. The Queen, noticing the sudden hush, stepped forward herself. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed emotion. "It's quite all right, Sergeant," she said softly. "You may open it." He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a careful motion, he released the clasp. The box creaked open. Inside lay something simple, yet utterly unexpected. A bundle of old letters, tied together with faded blue ribbon. Beneath them, a small photograph, its edges curled from age. It showed a much younger Camilla, standing beside a smiling woman, holding a baby. The photo was marked with a handwritten note on the back, "For when you need strength." For a moment, no one spoke. Daniel blinked, unsure how to respond. This wasn't contraband. It wasn't protocol breaking. It was something else, something deeply human. Queen Camilla exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the box. "They belonged to my mother," she said quietly. "She passed when I was just a girl. These letters were the last thing she ever wrote me." A hush fell over the entire hall. Even the clatter of distant luggage belts seemed to fade. Daniel straightened his posture, his throat tightening with empathy. "My apologies, Your Majesty. I didn't." Camilla smiled faintly. "You did your duty, Sergeant, and I thank you for it." But as she looked down at the letters again, her expression changed. Something flickered behind her composure. A tear she didn't allow to fall. Then she closed the box, holding it close to her chest. What Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that those letters contained more than just words of love. They carried a memory, a secret known only to a handful of people in the royal circle, a secret that, once revealed, would ripple all the way to Buckingham Palace itself. As Camilla turned to leave, the guards stepped aside in perfect formation, their eyes following her silently. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something far greater than a routine inspection had just unfolded before them. He watched as her convoy disappeared into the misty morning light, and for the first time in years, the veteran guard felt something unfamiliar, an ache of sympathy for the woman behind the crown. Whatever was in those letters, it wasn't just a mother's message. It was a story that hadn't yet been told, and soon the world would know it. That afternoon, behind the frosted windows of the royal motorcade, Queen Camilla sat silently, the small wooden box resting on her lap. The rain had returned, tracing silver lines across the glass. Outside, London blurred past, gray streets, flashes of umbrellas, the rhythm of ordinary life unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside that car. To her security detail, it looked like nothing unusual, just a queen consort returning to Clarence House. But to the woman within, every raindrop felt like a heartbeat echoing from past. Those letters, they weren't just keepsakes. They were reminders of a promise she'd buried decades ago. At Buckingham Palace, the story of the airport inspection had already reached Prince William, not through official channels, but by whisper. A royal guard had respectfully followed protocol, and in doing so, stumbled upon something personal belonging to Queen Camilla. In most cases, such a minor matter would have been forgotten within the hour, but the palace thrives on whispers, and when whispers involve the queen consort, they echo through every marble corridor. William stood by the window of his office, looking out at the palace gardens. "They said it was a box of letters," he repeated, his brow furrowed. "Old family correspondence. Why is everyone acting like it's a scandal?" His advisor shifted uneasily. "Because, Your Royal Highness, one of the letters, apparently, mentioned your grandmother." William turned sharply. "My grandmother? The late Queen?" The advisor nodded. "Yes, sir. It seems there are references to private conversations, perhaps ones that were never meant to surface." William sighed. The last thing the monarchy needed was another wave of speculation. But something about this didn't sit right. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had always kept her family's emotions guarded behind duty. If Camilla's mother had written to her, it suggested something deeper. "Find out the truth," he said quietly, "but do it discreetly. I don't want gossip. I want facts." Meanwhile, inside her private sitting room, Camilla carefully unfolded one of the letters. The paper was thin, yellowed, the ink fading at the edges. Her mother's handwriting was elegant but trembling, as if written during her final days. My dearest Cammy, if these words ever reach you, I may already be gone. But there is something I must tell you, something your heart will one day need to remember. The crown can protect a nation, but it cannot protect the soul. Never lose yours. And when the day comes that love and duty pull you apart, choose the one that keeps your heart kind. Camilla closed her eyes, pressing the paper against her chest. That line, "The crown cannot protect the soul," had haunted her for years. Her mother, Rosalind, had written those words before she passed away from illness when Camilla was just 17. And now, decades later, those same words felt more relevant than ever. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Your Majesty," said her private secretary, "Prince William has requested a private audience." Camilla hesitated, then nodded. "Send him in." William entered, composed as ever, though his eyes held concern. "Stepmother," he greeted softly, using the respectful but warm tone he reserved for personal moments. Camilla smiled faintly. "You've heard, I assume." "I have. The guard were simply doing their job, but it seems there's more to this than a misplaced box." She exhaled slowly, motioning for him to sit. "There is, but not in the way the palace might fear." She opened the box once more, handing him one of the letters. William read silently, his expression changing from curiosity to quiet awe. "These are your mother's?" "Yes," Camilla replied. "I kept them hidden because they're the last pieces of her I have left, and one of them, the one that mentions your grandmother, is something I've never shared." William looked puzzled. "My grandmother?" Camilla nodded. "Before I married your father, long before any of this, your grandmother wrote to my mother. It was the early years of the monarchy's modernization, when the royal image mattered more than hearts or happiness. She asked my mother to persuade me to end things with your father, to stay away from him, for the sake of the crown." The words hung heavy between them. "So the Queen tried to separate you and my father?" William asked quietly. Camilla looked away, her voice trembling but composed. "Yes, but not out of cruelty. Out of duty. She feared scandal, confusion, division. And my mother, God bless her, did as she was told. But she regretted it deeply. That's why she wrote those words. Choose the one that keeps your heart kind." William sat back, his thoughts spiraling. It wasn't anger he felt. It was shock. For years, he'd known the complicated history between his father and Camilla, the storms they'd weathered in the public eye. But to learn that his grandmother had played a direct role, that changed everything. "She must have been trying to protect the institution," he murmured. "But maybe she forgot that the people inside it are human, too." Camilla nodded. "Exactly. And that's why I never spoke of it. The Queen carried enough burdens in her life. But now that she's gone, I feel the weight of silence growing heavier. Perhaps it's time for the truth to be known, not to harm her legacy, but to remind the world that even monarchs bleed quietly behind their crowns." William looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time not as the woman the tabloids once vilified, but as a daughter still mourning her mother, as a human being carrying the past like a fragile heirloom. "Then maybe," he said softly, "this story deserves to be told properly, on your terms." Camilla's eyes glistened, but she smiled. "Perhaps, though I wonder the world is ready to see that kind of honesty from the royal family." William smiled faintly. "They might be more ready than you think." As he left her chambers, the echo of that conversation stayed with him. A queen's private pain, a mother's final words, and a truth hidden in a box of letters, all intertwined with the legacy of the monarchy itself. And though he didn't know it yet, those letters would soon find their way into the public light, sparking conversations across the nation about love, sacrifice, and the cost of wearing the crown. But before that moment came, the palace would face one more challenge, an internal debate that would test loyalty, compassion, and the true meaning of royal duty. And it would begin not with a press release, but with a single decision behind closed doors. The heavy wooden doors of Buckingham Palace's private council room closed with a low, echoing thud. Outside, tourists took photos of the guards in their red uniforms, smiling at the beauty of the palace. But inside, the air was thick with tension. At the head of the long table sat King Charles III, his expression unreadable. Around him were a small circle of advisors, secretaries, and press officers, all waiting for him to speak. In the center of the polished table lay a single object, the small wooden box that had caused all the stir. The king's hand rested on it, his thumb tracing its worn brass clasp. I understand, he began slowly, that this, he tapped the box lightly, was flagged at the airport, and that its contents have now become a topic of interest among the staff. The advisors exchanged careful glances. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak. Finally, Sir Alistair Hammond, the Royal Communications Chief, cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the discovery itself is harmless, sentimental, even, but the content of one of the letters could be interpreted controversially if taken out of context. It mentions the late Queen's private communication with Mrs. Shand, Her Majesty's mother. Charles's gaze lifted sharply. It's Rosalind Shand, Alistair. Speak her name with respect. Of course, Your Majesty, Hammond stammered. It's simply that the press, if they ever caught wind of such a letter, might frame it as interference. Perhaps even manipulation. You know how these things spiral. Charles leaned back, exhaling deeply. So you suggest we hide it? There was a pause. Then Hammond said carefully, we recommend keeping it private. For now. The public has only recently begun to see the monarchy as modern, united, forward-looking. This could reopen old wounds. From the far end of the table, Prince William spoke quietly. Or it could heal them. All eyes turned to him. Go on, said Charles, his tone both cautious and curious. William looked between them. For years, the world has painted our family as cold, out of touch, and emotionless. But these letters, show something else. They show that love, loss, and regret exist even behind the palace gates. If people knew that my grandmother once made a difficult decision out of duty, and that my stepmother still carries those words in her heart, they might see us as human again. Charles frowned slightly, tapping the table with his fingertips. You think vulnerability strengthens a monarchy? I think honesty does, William replied. People don't want perfection anymore. They want truth and empathy. The room fell silent. Outside, the clock chimed 11, its sound echoing faintly through the marble halls. Camilla, who had been sitting quietly beside the king, finally spoke. Her voice was gentle but steady. Charles, you know I never meant for any of this to become public. Those letters were my mother's final words to me. But perhaps William is right. If the story is told properly, not as scandal, but as remembrance, maybe it can remind people that being royal doesn't mean being unfeeling. The king looked at her, his eyes softening. You still carry her words, don't you? Camilla nodded. Every day. She told me to keep my heart kind, even when duty demanded otherwise. That advice has saved me more than once. Charles looked away, his expression thoughtful, the weight of the crown suddenly visible on his shoulders. The monarchy has always been about strength, he murmured. But perhaps it's time people saw that strength doesn't mean stone. Sir Alistair interjected carefully. Your Majesty, I must warn that releasing such personal correspondence could ignite mixed public opinion. Some may see it as brave, others as unnecessary exposure. Charles gave a wry smile. When has public opinion ever been unanimous? He stood, moving toward the window. Outside, the gardens glistened under soft rain, the fountains rippling in the breeze. My mother believed in preserving dignity through silence. I respected that. But silence can also become a wall. Perhaps it's time we open a window. He turned back to them. Prepare a statement. Something simple from both of us. Camilla's eyes widened slightly. Charles. He reached for her hand. You once said love and duty can coexist. Let's prove it. That evening, while advisors drafted potential statements, a smaller, more intimate conversation unfolded upstairs. Prince William and Princess Kate sat together in their private quarters, reviewing the developments. Kate, ever the voice of reason, listened carefully as William recounted the palace discussion. So he's really considering it? She asked softly. William nodded. For once, he's not thinking like a king. He's thinking like a son and a husband. I think that's what people need to see." Kate smiled gently. "It's brave. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's truth. And truth can be the most powerful bridge." William leaned back, exhaling. "I just hope the world is kind to her. She doesn't deserve another round of judgment." Kate reached over, resting her hand on his. "If there's one thing your grandmother taught us all, it's that grace under fire is its own kind of royalty. Camilla has that too. She just hides it well." Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, the old royal guard, Sergeant Daniel Wright, sat quietly in the staff lounge, sipping his tea. Word of the day's events had reached even the lowest ranks, though in fragments and whispers. He watched the rain streak down the tall windows and thought of that morning at Heathrow, the trembling hands of Queen, the small wooden box, the look in her eyes. He didn't know what would come of it all, but he hoped, sincerely, that whatever truth lay within those letters brought her peace. "Strange thing, loyalty," he murmured to a younger guard nearby. "We're taught to guard crowns and gates. But sometimes what really needs guarding is a heart." The younger guard blinked, unsure what to say. Daniel smiled faintly. "You'll understand one day." That night, long after most of the palace lights had dimmed, King Charles sat alone in his study. The letters were spread out before him. The words of his late mother-in-law seemed to echo softly through the silence. "Never lose your soul to the crown." He touched the edge of the page, his eyes distant. For the first time in a long while, he realized that perhaps the real strength of a monarch wasn't in power, but in compassion. And as the rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, he whispered to the empty room, "Rosalind, your daughter turned out stronger than any of us ever knew." By morning, the palace was ready. The statement had been written. The world was about to learn the truth, not through leaks or rumors, but through honesty. And in doing so, the royal family would take a step no monarch had taken in generations, showing that behind every title, every crown, every carefully guarded image beats a human heart. The morning sun broke through the clouds above Buckingham Palace, washing its ancient stone in soft gold. Reporters gathered outside the main gates, their cameras poised, unsure what was about to unfold. The royal press office had released a short, unexpected statement at dawn, one that immediately stirred curiosity across Britain and beyond. The message was simple. Her Majesty Queen Camilla wishes to share a personal reflection from her past, a tribute to her late mother, Rosalind Shand, whose letters of love and guidance have long been a private source of strength. These words, discovered once more, remind us that the bonds of family, memory, and compassion transcend duty and time. Within minutes, the world's attention turned toward the palace. Inside the press room, a hush settled as Queen Camilla and King Charles III stepped forward together. Cameras flashed, but Camilla's calm presence commanded quiet. She carried the same small wooden box that had once caused such unease at Heathrow Airport. She placed it gently on the podium and began to speak. "When I was a young girl," she began softly, "my mother told me that the crown protects a nation, but kindness protects the soul. In this box are her letters, words written to remind me never to let duty harden my heart. I have carried them with me for decades. Recently, by chance, they were rediscovered. And in reading them again, I remembered not only her love, but the humanity we all share, no matter our title." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes held steady. The cameras zoomed closer, capturing every emotion that flickered across her face. "This is not a revelation of scandal," she continued. "It is a reflection of love, the kind that outlasts everything. My mother's final letter urged me to choose the path that keeps the heart kind. It was a lesson I have tried to live by in public service, in family, and in forgiveness." Charles stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. When she finished, he spoke briefly, his tone deep, sincere, and weighted with understanding. "My late mother, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, led this nation with unwavering strength and duty. Yet she, too, understood the quiet power of compassion. In sharing these letters, Camilla honors not only her own mother, but all who have ever sacrificed their hearts for a greater purpose." For a moment, silence filled the room, not the tense silence of scrutiny, but one of genuine emotion. Even the seasoned reporters looked moved. That afternoon, television networks across the world broadcast the speech. The reaction was immediate and unexpected. In living rooms, cafes, and classrooms, people spoke not of scandal, but of tenderness. Social media buzzed with phrases like a new kind of royalty, and finally, a glimpse of humanity behind the crown. Commentators praised the Queen's courage. Others simply said it made them see her differently. But the most touching moment came not from the news, nor from the palace itself, but from a letter. Later that week, Buckingham Palace received thousands of envelopes, handwritten notes from ordinary citizens. One, written by a young girl named Clara from Birmingham, read, "Dear Queen Camilla, I just want to tell you that I kept my mother's old letters too. I used to be embarrassed by them, but now I see their treasures. Thank you for reminding me." When Camilla read it, she smiled softly. The impact wasn't in grandeur or politics. It was in connection. Rose, the private moment. That evening, after the noise of the world had quieted, Camilla returned to her private sitting room. The wooden box sat on her desk once again. She opened it one final time. Inside, beneath the old letters, lay a small folded note she hadn't noticed before. Her breath caught as she carefully unfolded it. It was written in her mother's familiar hand. "One day, my darling girl, when the world sees you not for your title, but for your heart, you'll know I'm proud of you." Camilla's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she wasn't the queen consort. She wasn't the public figure or the headline. She was simply a daughter, loved, remembered, and finally at peace. Charles entered quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Everything all right, darling?" She looked up, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I think so. I think she'd be proud." He nodded gently. "Then that's all that matters. Crown the legacy." Over the following weeks, newspapers wrote of a softer monarchy and a new age of emotional transparency. Polls showed a surprising surge in public affection toward the queen consort, something few had predicted. But beyond the statistics and headlines, something more subtle had shifted. People began writing again, real letters, not just emails or tweets. Schools launched letters of kindness, projects inspired by the Queen's story. In a world rushing toward the future, the power of a handwritten word, a mother's voice on fading paper, had reminded millions that compassion never goes out of style. And somewhere high above the palace, as dusk painted the sky in royal hues of violet and gold, it almost felt as though Rosalind Shan herself was smiling down, her final message fulfilled. Clapperboard Oichiaro almost equals 150 words. And so, what began as a simple airport inspection became something far more powerful, a reminder that even behind the world's most guarded walls, the heart still leads. Queen Camilla's rediscovered letters showed us that kindness, honesty, and love can survive even under the heaviest crowns. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a secret. It was a story about legacy, about how a mother's voice can echo through generations, shaping not just one woman's heart, but a nation's view of its queen. If you found this story moving, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share with someone who believes in the strength of family and the power of truth. Because in the end, even royalty is human. And sometimes that's what makes them truly remarkable.
Please proceed with the security scan, ma'am. Very well.